Okay, so I think by this point I've explained most of the basics of using your camera. If you haven't been following along, at the end of this video I'll put a playlist that'll let you go back to the beginning of all these lessons. Now, there's one last thing I think we should address. JPEG versus RAW. Now, you will see a very famous YouTuber who constantly wears t-shirts that say he shoots RAW and feels you should only ever shoot RAW. But there are pros and cons to shooting JPEG versus shooting RAW. Now, fundamentally, the difference is this. A RAW file from a digital camera is the same as a negative from film. You can then go on in software, Lightroom being the most famous, and develop that image from the RAW file. So you can choose the color balances, you can choose the contrast, the exposure, you can make parts of the frame a little bit lighter, a little bit darker, known as dodging and burning back in film days, etc. And you have all that control with RAW files. You can even set the white balance after the fact in your processing software. With a JPEG, what's happened is the camera has taken the RAW file, all the data that it collected on the sensor, and it has converted it to a finished image for you. Now, it's set the white balance and it's baked it in. You can't change it anymore. You can try, but it won't really work very well. It's managed to throw away lots of information from the negative to choose what it thinks should be bright, what it should think should be dark, how green a green should be, how red a red should be, how bright the green should be, how dark the green should be, etc. Everything's put in there and everything's baked in place. Now, that means for you as a photographer, there's very little to do after the fact. You've got your images, they look how they look, brilliant. You can just crop them or whatever you want to do with them. You can do some editing, definitely, and you can do some retouching in Photoshop, but you don't have anywhere near the control that you have with a RAW file. So the advantage to JPEGs is that a lot of the work's already done for you, if you're happy with how the work is being done by the camera. Now, most cameras will allow you to adjust how they create the JPEG to some degree, so that you can have some control over how it comes out. Fuji cameras, for example, allow you to choose what they call film simulations, which are looks that have a relationship to how film stock used to look. Different types of film stock had different looks, different characteristics. Pentax cameras, which are used for a long time, will allow you to change how saturated a red is, etc. Sony cameras offer similar sort of things. I'm sure other cameras offer similar options. RAW files are the raw data that comes out of the camera, and you can control all of this without any data having been binned on a computer. Now, RAW files, they're much bigger. Their physical file size is much bigger, so you'll get less of them on your memory card than you will if you're shooting JPEGs. Also, if you're shooting in burst mode, you will find that your camera can take more JPEGs than it can take RAW files before it starts to slow down because the buffer is filling and the write speed isn't happening to the camera. Now, which is best? RAW is best. There's no doubt about it. RAW is best. But JPEG has its place. I personally would generally use JPEG on an old camera that I used to use that has a slow frames per second, which is how many images it can capture per second, because I knew it also had a shallow buffer that I could get more done if I shot JPEG over RAW files. But if you're shooting JPEG, you have to know you're getting the settings right in camera, so that the minor tweaks that you're going to make in post-production will be enough for you. So my advice would be always to shoot RAW, but JPEG has its place. Now, if you're in two minds, most cameras will allow you to shoot RAW plus JPEG. So you'll record a JPEG and it'll record a RAW. If you're happy with a JPEG, then you can just delete the RAW. If you're not, you can delete the JPEG and go look at and work up the RAW. Hope you found that helpful.